I'm talking to you about the icebox murders of Fred and Edwina Rogers in 1965 in Texas. Now, if we're going to be precise about it, the name, the icebox murders, is inaccurate. The victims were actually found in the refrigerator. Fred and Edwina Rogers, who were 81 and 72 years old respectively, hadn't answered the phone for 3 days, and their nephew, Marvin, was getting worried. He went to their house, but no one answered the door, and the blinds were all closed. He called the police and requested they come and conduct a wellness check on the elderly couple. Around 9 p.m, the police officers and Marvin knocked on the front door again, but still no answer. So police broke the front door down and went in. Inside, there was no sign of the couple or their 43-year-old son, Charles, who also lived at the property. The 1.5-story home was disorderly, but Marvin said neither his aunt or uncle were the best housekeepers, so that didn't seem out of the ordinary. What was weird, however, was the 2 plates of uneaten food sitting on the dining table, which had obviously been there for some time. One of the officers noticed a strong odour coming from the fridge, so he opened it and saw various cuts of meat. They were washed, but unwrapped and stacked high in rows, filling every shelf. Now, he thought it was hog meat, but as he turned to close the door, he cast his eyes downwards and was shocked to see 2 dismembered heads placed in the plastic compartment at the bottom of the fridge. The heads belonged to Fred and Edwina Rogers. Records after the autopsies were conducted showed that Fred had been beaten with what was most likely a claw hammer, and he had had his eyes gouged out and his genitals removed. Edwina had been beaten and then shot in the head. After they were dead, the killer dragged the bodies to the master bathroom, drained the blood, chopped them into pieces, and placed the cuts neatly in the fridge. There were pieces of the bodies missing, and later some organs were recovered from a nearby sewer. The killer had apparently tried to dispose of them by flushing them down the toilet. That never works. The medical examiner is quoted in the Amarillo Globe-Times as saying, "Whoever did this apparently took their time and knew what they were doing. This dismemberment was a fairly neat job." The house had been carefully cleaned of blood and evidence, despite what Marvin had said when he came in with the police. There were wood stairs leading up to Charles's bedroom in the attic that had recently been scrubbed. In his room, there was clothing, a hot plate, and a kettle, and dishes, and a collection of ham radios. Besides the radios, they also found a bloodied keyhole saw, and it's thought that this is what was used to dismember Fred and Edwina. Charles Frederick Rogers, their 43-year-old son, was the immediate suspect, but nobody could find him. He was said to be extremely intelligent. He spoke 7 languages and had a BA in nuclear physics. He'd been a pilot for the US Navy during World War II. Later, he became a seismologist for the Shell Oil Company. At some point in the 50s, he was involved in the Civil Air Patrol, where he met David Ferry, a man who was later accused of being involved in the plot to assassinate JFK. Following 9 successful years with Shell Oil, one day Charles inexplicably quit his job overnight and moved back in with his parents. It should be noted that it was actually Charles's house they were all living in, but he moved into the attic room. He furnished his living area with a hot plate on which he could cook rudimentary meals. He never mixed with his parents downstairs. The 2 parties only communicated by passing notes under each other's doors. He often left the house at dawn and came back very late in the evenings. What he did all day was a mystery. Indeed, the neighbours were mostly unaware that he was living there at all, and for the few that did know about him, they confirmed that he was very reclusive. After the murders, and despite the police launching an international manhunt for Charles, he was never seen again. There are numerous theories about what really happened, and several unsubstantiated sightings of Charles over the years. In 1992, authors John R. Craig and Philip A. Rogers, who is no relation to the Rogers family, mentioned Charles in their book, The Man on the Grassy Knoll. The authors, who were investigators for the National Intelligence Service Bureau, say that Charles was a CIA agent until the mid-1980s. They suggest that he was one of the men who assassinated President John F. Kennedy, going as far as to say he impersonated Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico City. They also claim Charles was one of the so-called three tramps, along with Charles Harrelson and Chancey Holt, who were arrested in Dealey Plaza after the assassination attempt. They go as far as to say that this is the reason Charles had to kill his parents. Edwina was listening to and keeping track of his calls with the CIA operatives. I guess there was no cell phones, so he was probably using the house landline. They assert that the logical conclusion is that the elderly couple were killed for knowing too much. According to them, Charles fled to Guatemala and died in old age. Needless to say, their book has been heavily criticised for its complete lack of sources. Forensic specialists Hugh and Martha Gardinier began investigating the case in 1997. They don't believe that Charles was a CIA agent, but they agree that he would have known and worked with CIA contract workers when he was a seismologist. They also published a book called The Icebox Murders, asserting that it was their belief that Charles was emotionally and physically abused from childhood and throughout his adult life by his parents. At the time of their deaths, it was reported that they were faking Charles's signature on deeds of land that he owned, and remortgaging the house, the house that they were all living in together, and pocketing the money. The Gardiniers believed that he planned his parents' murder for years and used his higher-up connections from years spent working in the oil and mining companies to enlist help and fly to Mexico. They think that he eventually ended up in Honduras, where he was ultimately killed some years later over a wage dispute with miners. Charles Rogers was legally declared dead in absentia by a judge in 1975, so that his estate could go through probate and the family's affairs to be put into order. The murders of Fred and Edwina Rogers remain an unsolved case. However, Charles was, and still is, considered the prime suspect. The house, located at 1815 Driscoll Street, remained empty until it was demolished in 1972. The lot was empty until 2000, when property developers built condominiums on the site. The fact that Charles has remained missing boils down to, I think, two possible theories. One, that he was responsible and fled the country to avoid being caught. Or two, that he was abducted and killed, and his body disposed of somewhere by whoever had killed his parents. But then, why not leave the body at the house with the others? And who or what would be the motive for killing the parents? The crime scene was cleaned so well and the bodies dismembered and arranged so precisely, it seems unlikely. Who would gain something from framing Charles? Unless, of course, there is an element of truth to those JFK conspiracy theories. If you enjoyed learning about this case, do leave me a thumbs up and a comment. If you're not already, please consider subscribing to my channel for more videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.